Long before humans ruled the land, giants still walked the earth. Emerging from the freezing mists of a brutal Ice Age world, the Glossotherium was a massive ancient titan. One of them looked slow, peaceful, almost harmless, moving steadily across the cold prehistoric plains. This magnificent creature seemed like a gentle giant wandering quietly through the frozen silence. But beneath the fur was immense strength. Weighing over 1,000 kilograms, its muscular frame was heavily built to withstand the brutal extremes of the Ice Age and deter any threats. Its claws alone could tear through roots and branches. These massive curved weapons helped it uncover food hidden deep beneath the frosted earth and excavate massive burrows underground. When it stood tall, few animals ignored it. Rising onto its hind legs to reach higher vegetation or survey the land, the Glossotherium commanded deep respect from everything sharing the plains. It survived in a harsh world shaped by cold and scarcity. Every heavy, labored breath turned to thick white vapor in the freezing air, a quiet rhythm enduring against the unforgiving elements. Most of its life was spent moving slowly through silence. In a vast and unforgiving wilderness, this lonely titan traveled constantly to find enough grassy vegetation to survive the endless winter. It was not built for speed, but for endurance. Behind its cautious eyes was the quiet intelligence of a creature uniquely adapted to outlast the harshest conditions on the prehistoric Earth. And even giants could become targets. In a desperate ecosystem where predators constantly stalked the ice, a creature of this incredible size had to remain forever watchful to survive. Every movement carried enormous weight. Each slow, heavy step pressed deeply into the frozen mud, a relentless march driven by a quadrupedal locomotion built on sheer strength. This was no ordinary sloth. Towering over the ancient grasslands alongside other remarkable survivors, it was an undeniable heavyweight in an ecosystem built on a monumental scale. It belonged to a vanished world of giant mammals. Its incredibly dense coat shielded it from the howling winds, perfectly anchoring it to an era defined by unyielding ice. But even giants can disappear. No matter how powerful or perfectly adapted it was, this animal was bound to a prehistoric plains ecosystem that stood on the brink of catastrophic change. An extinction was already approaching. The ice was beginning to shift, the climate was destabilizing, and entirely new threats would soon step foot onto its ancient feeding grounds. To understand why, we must return to its world. We must witness how this giant lived, how it endured, and how the turning tide of the Ice Age ultimately sealed its tragic fate. Glossotherium lived in a world ruled by cold winds and endless distance. Stretching as far as the eye could see, these enormous Ice Age plains formed a beautiful but unforgiving prehistoric landscape. The landscape was open, harsh, and constantly changing. Survival meant adapting to massive stretches of frozen grasslands that offered almost no shelter from the relentless, biting chill of the ancient world. Far beyond the plains, massive walls of ice shaped the climate itself. Towering distant glaciers and snowy mountain peaks dominated the horizon, dictating the freezing temperatures that swept across the continent. Life moved slowly across these plains, always searching for food. Great herds of prehistoric herbivores crossed the open land in a perpetual, exhausting migration, driven by the constant need to graze. Survival depended on endurance more than comfort, with icy winds violently sweeping dust and snow across the dry grass. Every living creature had to be built like a fortress just to stay alive. Here, the giant sloth found its place. Walking carefully and deliberately through the frosted vegetation, the Glossotherium navigated this extreme environment with the quiet confidence of a true Ice Age survivor. The environment shifted between open plains and sparse woodland. These scattered prehistoric forests provided brief moments of cover, breaking up the endless sea of frozen grass with ancient, hardy trees. Low vegetation and rough plant life became essential food sources. For a massive ground sloth relying on a grassy diet, these tough, frost-covered roots and shrubs were the vital fuel needed to endure the freeze. The giant sloth lived among mammoths, predators, and other ancient survivors. This was a thriving megafaunal ecosystem, a delicate balance where massive titans shared the frozen earth in a constant struggle for resources. Danger was always nearby, even for large animals. Lurking just out of sight, deadly predators watched from the fog and snow, reminding every herbivore that a single mistake could be their last. Every peaceful moment still required caution. Even while feeding calmly on low vegetation, the Glossotherium had to keep its senses sharp, relying on its remarkable hearing to detect the subtle approach of danger. Weather could shift quickly, bringing sudden hardship. As dark, heavy clouds moved rapidly across the cold landscape, dropping temperatures could turn an already difficult day into a desperate battle against the elements. Water sources became centers of survival. As rivers cut through the frozen plains, they created vital oases where diverse prehistoric animals gathered, bringing predators and prey into dangerous proximity. Even simple movement required energy for such a massive body. Approaching the water slowly and carefully, the heavy-set sloth conserved every ounce of strength, aware that the muddy banks could conceal hidden threats. In such a vast world, solitude was common. Across the enormous open terrain, animals frequently found themselves entirely alone, relying solely on their own strength and instincts to navigate the empty wilderness. Its appearance helped it disappear into the muted colors of the Ice Age. The sloth's dense fur blended perfectly into the earthy, frost-covered environment, offering a natural camouflage against the pale, freezing backdrop. For thousands of years, this ancient balance held together. It was a perfectly adapted natural world, where colossal mammals and harsh climates shaped an ecosystem that felt vast, timeless, and completely unbreakable. But no Ice Age world lasts forever. Even as the sun cast a peaceful glow over this cold, majestic landscape, the invisible wheels of climate change were already beginning to turn, signaling the start of a profound collapse. Glossotherium was built to survive a difficult world. Standing resolute beneath the cold gray sky, its entire anatomy was perfectly engineered to endure the harshest conditions the Ice Age could offer. Its enormous frame stored strength and endurance, packed with dense muscle and heavy fat reserves beneath its thick coat. This immense ground sloth was an unstoppable engine of prehistoric survival. Its claws were among its most powerful tools. Illuminated by the pale, cold light of the sun, these massive, sharply curved scythes were as essential for foraging as they were for defense. They could tear through earth, roots, and heavy vegetation. With devastating force, these formidable weapons easily fractured the frozen soil, unearthing the hidden nutrition needed to sustain its colossal bulk. Dense fur protected it from the brutal cold. As the icy wind howled across the plains, its deeply insulated, shaggy coat acted as an impenetrable barrier against the freezing, relentless elements. Its limbs carried incredible weight across unstable ground. Thick, pillar-like forelimbs absorbed the massive burden of its body, allowing the giant to steadily navigate the shifting, muddy, and snow-covered terrain. It was not fast, but it did not need to be. Moving with a slow, rhythmic deliberation through the rough terrain, the sloth favored absolute stability and power over any sudden bursts of speed. Every step showed the size of the animal. As its heavy, clawed feet pressed deeply into the mixture of mud and snow, they left behind massive tracks that told the story of a true giant. At times, it could rise upward to reach food others could not. Balancing securely on its powerful hind legs and sturdy tail, it stretched high to pull down untouched branches and foliage. Its height made it one of the dominant herbivores of its environment, towering magnificently over the surrounding shrubs and grasses. It claimed the upper canopy of the prehistoric plains with absolute authority. Despite its strength, awareness remained essential. Behind its calm, deep-set eyes lay a sharp, calculating intelligence that constantly monitored the quiet landscape for any signs of hidden danger. Its size came with limitations. Turning its colossal frame required deliberate, heavy effort, making quick escapes impossible if an Ice Age predator managed to close the distance unseen. It relied more on intimidation than escape. Even as predators observed from the misty distance, the unbothered sloth stood its ground, its sheer mass serving as the ultimate deterrent against an attack. Those claws could also become weapons if threatened. Gripping the frosty ground defensively, these massive hooks could deliver a devastating, lethal blow to any predator foolish enough to strike. But maintaining such a body required enormous energy. With every heavy, vapor-filled breath in the freezing air, its massive internal furnace demanded a constant, never-ending supply of low-quality vegetation. Most of its life revolved around finding enough food. To fuel its incredible bulk, the solitary titan spent countless hours grazing steadily across the vast, frozen plains, always searching for its next meal. It was a survivor shaped by patience and endurance. Moving alone through the empty, haunting landscape, it represented the ultimate triumph of evolutionary resilience in an unforgiving, prehistoric climate. But even endurance has limits. Standing like a defiant monument beneath darkening storm clouds, this magnificent survivor could not foresee the insurmountable changes that would soon claim its world. As the frozen world slowly awakened beneath a pale dawn, the giant sloth stirred from its rest, beginning another day of quiet survival in the harsh Ice Age. Its entire life followed a steady, unhurried rhythm shaped entirely by the demands of survival, moving steadily across the vast and open prehistoric plains. For an animal of this immense size, most of its waking hours were spent in a relentless search for food, using its incredible strength to harvest the land. Equipped with a broad snout and flat teeth, it fed heavily on low-growing roots, tough grasses, and the rough plant life that managed to grow in the freezing soil. Its slow, methodical movement across the landscape was a crucial adaptation, deliberately designed to conserve precious energy in an environment where calories were difficult to find. But even in these seemingly calm, peaceful moments, survival required constant awareness. Pausing its meal, it would lift its heavy head to scan the silent horizon. The Ice Age was a brutal teacher that rewarded the alert and quickly punished the careless. Predators were always lurking, camouflaged within the dense, freezing fog. Once assured of its safety, the giant sloth continued its slow, heavy journey across the land. Forced to travel long distances just to find enough vegetation to survive. Driven by immensely strong forelimbs, its massive claws ripped effortlessly into the frozen earth, uncovering vital, hidden roots that other herbivores simply could not reach. Water shaped many of its daily movements. Navigating the treacherous plains, the sloth was naturally drawn to these vital rivers and frozen prehistoric lakes. Lowering its head to drink, it remained intensely alert, fully aware that even the simplest, most necessary moments of survival carried the deadly risk of an ambush. Much of its long life was spent in profound isolation. Wandering alone across the massive, empty terrain, it relied entirely on its own strength and instincts. When the weather turned violent, rest became absolutely essential. Finding shelter beneath sparse ancient trees, The massive animal waited out the worst of the brutal storms. The volatile Ice Age climate was a relentless adversary, constantly testing the endurance of every living creature with blinding snow and violent, freezing winds. As the storms passed, it immediately returned to feeding. Its continued survival depended heavily on this unwavering persistence, rather than any burst of speed or agility. As the sun dipped below the horizon, each day ended much like the last, slowly and quietly, as the great beast continued its endless march across the plains. But survival was not just about individual endurance. It was about protecting the future. Occasionally, a mother sloth could be seen carefully tending to her vulnerable offspring. Born into a frozen and dangerous world, the young sloth depended entirely on the massive safety, warmth, and quiet guidance provided by its watchful mother. Using her colossal bulk as a living fortress, the mother shielded her calf from the biting wind and lurking predators, a defense that meant the difference between life and death. In these rare, tender moments, it became abundantly clear that even in the most brutal and unforgiving Ice Age environment, the beautiful, quiet rhythm of life continued. But these moments were fleeting. For the vast majority of its life, existence returned to a solitary state of profound silence, deep isolation, and steady endurance. And while this ancient world still seemed entirely stable and permanent, invisible forces were shifting. Beneath the ice and soil, irreversible change had already begun. The future of the species depended on very few young. Like many giant mammals, their slow reproduction meant every single birth was a critical, fragile thread holding their existence together. From the beginning, survival was deeply uncertain. Born into a harsh, freezing environment filled with predators, a young calf faced monumental odds just to reach adulthood. Raising even one offspring required enormous energy. The mother had to dedicate years of constant vigilance and exhausted feeding to ensure her calf could endure the brutal Ice Age plains. Low population density made recovery incredibly difficult. Scattered across the massive, unforgiving landscape, these isolated family groups were highly vulnerable to any sudden changes in their environment. As numbers gradually declined, individuals became increasingly separated. The vast, sweeping grasslands began to feel painfully empty, a silent testament to a population that was slowly fracturing apart. Finding mates became infinitely harder across such vast distances. Wandering alone through the endless, empty wilderness, an adult sloth could travel for months without ever crossing paths with another. This deep isolation slowly but inevitably weakened the entire population. Without the ability to reliably replace the numbers lost to predators or the cold, the species was pushed closer to the brink. Environmental change steadily reduced their reliable food sources. As the climate shifted, the tough grasses and roots they depended on became increasingly scarce, leaving the giant herbivores desperate and hungry. The young needed time and stability to survive, but the environment offered neither. Exhausted calves struggled to keep pace as their mothers were forced to roam further just to find sustenance. But the world was becoming violently less forgiving. Confronted by harsher winters, shifting ecosystems, and unpredictable storms, the fragile bond of mother and calf was pushed beyond its absolute limits. In this shrinking habitat, each loss became exponentially more serious than the last. The death of a single adult was no longer just a tragedy. It was an irreversible blow to the survival of the species. Even the strongest survivors struggled to remain healthy. Foraging across the increasingly barren terrain, they spent far more energy seeking out food than they could ever regain from eating it. The population was simply becoming too small to sustain itself. Thinly scattered across a rapidly altering ecosystem, they had passed the critical point where natural recovery was biologically possible. Its body was unimaginably powerful, but recovery was tragically slow. Evolutionary traits that had guaranteed their survival for millions of years were suddenly unable to keep up with the rapid pace of change. The next generation faced far greater challenges than the one before. Looking fragile in the cold, fading light, this calf was inheriting a broken world that could no longer support its kind. The species was quietly fading from its own world. Without any sudden catastrophe or violent end, the giant ground sloths were slowly evaporating into the vast freezing emptiness of the plains. Survival of the individual was no longer enough to prevent extinction. Even if this lone giant managed to live out its years, it represented the tragic end of a once great biological lineage. And soon, even greater pressure would arrive. As the storm clouds of a shifting climate gathered overhead, an entirely unprecedented threat was about to step out from the shadows. Then the world began to change faster than ever before. Slowly but surely, the relentless, deep freeze of the Ice Age started to break, giving way to a warming landscape that would permanently alter everything. The Ice Age was ending, and ancient ecosystems were rapidly collapsing. Shifting temperatures and highly unstable weather patterns swept across the plains, tearing apart the delicate balance that had lasted for millennia. The environment Glossotherium depended on was disappearing. The endless sea of tough, frost-covered grasses began to shrink into patchy, unfamiliar vegetation, stripping away the giant herbivore's most vital food source. Its world was becoming harder to recognize. Wandering through this strange and drastically altered terrain, the magnificent survivor found itself completely out of place in a landscape it no longer understood. Food became dangerously less reliable with every passing season. What was once an abundant buffet of low-growing roots and shrubs was now spread impossibly thin across the warming, drying earth. Survival now demanded far more energy than before. The exhausted giant was forced to march much greater distances just to find a single meal, burning precious calories it desperately needed to conserve. But an unstable climate was not the only danger approaching. Out on the vast horizon, strange new silhouettes began to appear across the plains, bringing an entirely unprecedented threat to the ancient giants. A highly intelligent new predator had finally entered the ecosystem. Armed with primitive but deadly tools, early human hunters stepped onto the continent, forever changing the hierarchy of the prehistoric world. Unlike natural predators, these humans hunted with calculating planning and relentless persistence. They watched the giant sloths from a safe distance, studying their slow movements and patiently identifying their weaknesses. They possessed the unique ability to track large animals across incredibly great distances. By following the massive footprints left deeply in the mud, they could relentlessly pursue a single target for days. Glossotherium's immense size, once its greatest defense, now made it impossibly difficult to hide. Exposed in the increasingly open, patchy terrain, it became a highly visible target for a coordinated pack. While its physical strength remained utterly enormous, it was dangerously slow. Unable to outrun its agile pursuers, the magnificent creature was forced into exhausting, desperate standoffs as the hunters carefully surrounded it. Over time, this intelligent hunting strategy became a constant, suffocating pressure. The once peaceful plains were transformed into a relentless battleground, leaving the slowly recovering giant sloths with absolutely nowhere to rest. Because they reproduced so slowly, each individual loss weakened the species significantly further. The hunting of even a single adult sent tragic, irreversible shockwaves through the dwindling, highly isolated population. A rapidly warming climate and the aggressive expansion of humanity created an absolutely deadly combination. Forced to battle starvation and highly effective predators simultaneously, the giant sloths were pushed completely to the brink. With every passing year, there were fewer safe places left to survive. Trapped within a rapidly shrinking habitat, the majestic creatures were cornered by the inevitable, tragic march of a changing world. The ancient, delicate balance that had sustained these monumental giants for millions of years was violently breaking apart. The golden era of the megafauna was fading quickly into absolute shadow. Standing completely alone beneath a stormy, darkened sky, the last of these titans faced an impossible reality. Extinction was no longer a distant possibility. It was approaching rapidly, and it could not be stopped. By now, Glossotherium was no longer common. It was disappearing. The once heavily populated landscapes were slowly emptied of the monumental giants that had shaped them for millennia. The land remained, but the giants were fading from it, swept by a bitterly cold wind. These silent grasslands stood as a haunting reminder of the majestic creatures that were lost. The remaining survivors moved through a world growing increasingly quieter. With every slow, heavy step through the creeping fog, this lone giant wandered a landscape completely devoid of its own kind. Vast distance separated the final populations. Scattered and broken, these isolated individuals were spread so thinly across the enormous terrain that finding one another became a tragic impossibility. Even day-to-day survival could no longer guarantee a future. Pausing beneath the dark, heavy skies, the solitary survivor scanned the absolute emptiness, searching for a family that no longer existed. Each passing trail became harder and harder to find. As enormous footprints slowly washed away, filling silently with water and mud, the physical evidence of their existence was gently erased. The species was vanishing slowly and silently. There was no single catastrophic moment, just an agonizingly slow fade as empty landscapes permanently replaced the thriving prehistoric plains. Severe food shortages and constant, unforgiving pressure exhausted the few survivors. Struggling across the barren, dying vegetation, this weakened titan could no longer sustain its incredibly demanding body. The ancient world that created these giants was steadily collapsing. As the climate warmed and the fundamental vegetation changed forever, the very foundation of their survival was completely ripped away. And the pressure from humans never truly stopped. Advancing relentlessly across the altering plains, these highly adaptable hunters continued to claim the shrinking territories of the deeply vulnerable sloths. Each remaining animal carried the fragile future of the entire species alone. Crossing the open land as dusk finally fell, this solitary wanderer represented a majestic lineage marching toward its twilight. By now, there were simply too few left to recover. Even when a final isolated pair managed to cross paths in the fading light, the spark of their species could not be reignited. Brute endurance was no longer enough. Looking out through the tired, heavy eyes of an aging giant, we witnessed the quiet, tragic resignation of a creature that has simply run out of time. The magnificent giants of the Ice Age were disappearing one by one. The monumental ecosystem that once supported an entire empire of titans was now little more than a haunting ghost town. The final generation inherited a dying world. Forced to navigate a completely hostile, barren terrain, the last known survivors walked a tragic path with no possibility of salvation. Extinction was no longer a distant possibility. It was happening, standing defiant but utterly alone beneath a dark storm-filled sky. This final titan faced the inevitable end of its reign. One by one, the ultimate survivors disappeared. Their heavy, slow-moving silhouettes faded quietly into the thick fog and gathering darkness, swallowed entirely by the turning pages of history. Then, none remained. The heavy footsteps ceased, the breathing stopped, and the great beasts that had defined an era were permanently erased from the face of the earth. The extinction was absolutely complete. Across the vast, silent, prehistoric plains, there was no movement, no struggle, and no remaining shadow of the magnificent giant ground sloths. The earth continued, entirely unchanged. A cold wind mercilessly swept across the abandoned terrain, completely indifferent to the profound, tragic loss of one of its most incredible creations. But something ancient had vanished forever. Looking out toward the distant frozen horizon beneath the pale fading light, the world felt noticeably emptier without the slow march of the giants. A species that survived for thousands of years, she was gone. The environment they once shaped, the roots they tore, and the soil they moved would never feel their immense power again. No voice, no movement, no return. An eerie, overwhelming stillness dominated the fading Ice Age landscape, sealing the tragic fate of the Glossotherium in absolute permanence. Only fleeting echoes of their existence remained. The final traces of their giant footprints slowly dissolved into the mud, a temporary memory waiting to be buried by time. The majestic age of giants was definitively ending. Beneath the darkening skies, the silence spoke volumes, confirming that the megafauna's long, enduring chapter had drawn to a close. And the world moved on without them. The empty prehistoric wilderness stretched out into the distance, a vast and lonely stage where the greatest actors had permanently exited. Nature slowly buried the last physical signs of their survival. As a soft, quiet snowfall blanketed the empty ground, the deep scars left by the sloths were gently covered over, leaving behind only silence and memory. The endless horizon faded entirely into darkness, waiting for the future to eventually uncover the hidden bones of the magnificent beasts that once ruled the frost. After extinction, the world simply continued on, but something ancient and irreplaceable was missing. The golden plains awoke to the dawn, but the great towering shadows were permanently gone. The land remained, but its magnificent giants were gone forever. As a cold, biting wind moved endlessly through the silent grasslands, it carried only the haunting memory of an era that had passed. What survives today are merely the fragmented remains of a forgotten life. Deep beneath the modern soil, the fossilized remnants of their immense quiet power lie silently waiting to be uncovered. Claws that were once used for desperate survival now rest in profound silence. Bathed in soft, natural light, this petrified weapon stands as a stark, emotional monument to a monumental struggle. Through these priceless fossils, we slowly and painstakingly reconstruct their story. By brushing away thousands of years of dirt, we are finally able to touch the lost reality of the Ice Age. From a powerful, unyielding survivor to a fragile, stony memory, the grand beasts that once commanded the vast prehistoric plains have been completely and quietly reclaimed by the earth itself. Glossotherium became far more than just another extinct animal. Standing tall in the dim, hallowed halls of history, it became a profound symbol of the incredible fragility of life. Its disappearance irrevocably changed the balance of the prehistoric world. Without the giant herbivores to shape the land and vegetation, the entire ecosystem shifted, leaving an emptiness that was never filled. Millions of years of brilliant evolutionary design ultimately ended in silence. The great biological lineages that successfully conquered the bitter ice age were simply unable to endure the sudden turning of the earth. The physical tracks eventually disappeared, but the urgent warning remained. Their tragic, irreversible fate is a lasting reminder that no species, no matter how powerful, is completely immune to extinction. In story, paleontology, and our deepest imagination, the giant sloth still walks the Ice Age plains. It endlessly roams the cold, atmospheric horizons of a beautifully vanished world. Extinction is not only a story about the distant past, it fundamentally shapes the future. As the warm sun rises over the empty land, we are left to silently ponder our own place in the world. Glossotherium vanished thousands of years ago, but its silence still speaks to us. It reminds us how even the strongest, most resilient survivors can disappear when the world changes too quickly.